Greetings, everyone. I'm Jed Shlackman. I work as a holistic counselor, hypnotherapist, and energy healer. In this video, I'll be speaking about the subject of recovery from addiction. Addiction recovery is often a complex process. There can be multiple layers or levels of things that people are working through. Here I want to focus on the topic of spirituality versus morality and what role those may or may not play in working to heal or recover from addiction. From my perspective, spirituality is very valuable, often an essential element in a lasting recovery or healing process, whereas morality, that's something that if you bring it into an addiction program or treatment, it's actually counterproductive, especially for the long term. So we can think about how society has often looked at addiction in the past. It's been looked at in some cultures as a form of moral weakness, where a person is somehow sinful or bad, viewed that way based on displaying some addiction in their life. So people have judged addicts, looking upon them as somehow morally failed in some manner, rather than having compassion and understanding and providing support and resources to help those people, if they choose to, work through and get through that experience of addiction to a point where they're healthier, where they're not stuck in that particular pattern or behavior. Using the moral judgment concept is a way of using fear, in a sense, to try to get people to withdraw from a harmful behavior. It's kind of like telling a child that if they do something harmful, like if they hit their peers, that they're bad, that God's upset with them or something like that. So if the person accepts that supposed moral paradigm or moral authority, it might have the effect of giving enough influence to get that person to refrain from that behavior. So there are people who have this religious or moral belief that using psychoactive drugs is bad or sinful or immoral, and based upon that belief system, they're able to refrain from acting upon a temptation to use those substances. However, for the long term, that's not an actual solution to support a person's true health and wholeness. It's just their fear of judgment or fear of being bad, of being an identity that they would feel ashamed of, that's controlling their behavior. If something happened at some point where their acceptance of that belief system was removed, then they would once again be vulnerable to whatever impulses to act on a particular addiction might arise. Also, using morality tends to reinforce the sense of shame that a person might feel about themselves. They might feel both shamed and rejected by other people and by some spiritual God figure or character. So a person who's stuck in that shame they're not feeling good about themselves. They're feeling low in their self-worth. They may feel depressed, insecure, etc. And when people feel that way, what's one common behavior they exhibit to comfort themselves or to escape from those unpleasant feelings? Well, people often engage in addictions as their way of trying to feel better, to escape from unpleasant emotions, unpleasant sensations, to forget whatever's troubling them, etc. So that can actually reinforce the tendency to slip into the addiction when you're shaming someone, when you're reinforcing some sense of being bad or sinful. It's not something we want to promote when we're trying to help people overcome addiction. What we want to do is help people feel a sense of worth, a sense of love for themselves, of value. We can work toward some form of purpose or meaning in a person's life, a sense of connection, where they feel connected to their community and connected to their own spiritual source, to their own soul. And that's the long-term approach that I feel is valuable, to really develop that sense of purpose and connection in a person's life. So those are the things that are bringing a positive feeling for that person. And when that need for connection, that need for purpose are being fulfilled, the person has this pleasant feeling about their life and about themselves, and there's much less inclination toward using some type of substance to create a short-term positive feeling, because they're getting this sustained positive feeling by having this purpose that's fueling their life, that their energy is flowing toward, by having connections with other people where there's some mutual benefit, where people are supporting and sharing with one another, collaborating with one another and caring for one another. A person who's stuck in addictive patterns is often carrying with them unhealed wounds of rejection, abandonment, heartache, grief. So there's been some breaking or severing of connections that were meaningful to them, or some loss of a sense of purpose in their life. So someone might have lost a job, they might have broken up in a relationship, they might just be moving on to another phase in their life where the role that was significant to them earlier in their life is no longer so significant anymore. So it could be someone who was a parent and now their children are becoming adults, moving out of the home and going off on their own, and the parent has to reflect on what's their role and purpose in their life now, being able to adjust or adapt to the evolution of life itself, where things are not always going to stay the same. Things aren't stagnant. We're meant to evolve, to move through different phases in our life, to not always be playing the exact same role. So rather than using some addictive pattern or behavior or substance to fill in that void, you can actually face what you're feeling in your life. You can explore any disconnection you may be having between your current state of being or your current place in your path and where your soul may be wishing or hoping to guide you into the next phase or chapter of your life. So it's about having that harmony with your spirit, your soul, your higher self, that expanded aspect of your being that is at the core of who you are, the part of you that actually chose to incarnate as a human being on earth to have this experience with the various challenges that may confront you, with the different stresses, the different disappointments you may encounter, and so on. So that's where the spiritual element is really vital from my point of view, that we're aligned with our soul's plan or path that's prepared for us. Sometimes we kind of get sidetracked in our life. We might get lost in some type of addictive pattern where we're not pursuing what would actually bring us greater fulfillment. We're just reaching out, in a sense, for whatever gives us some immediate sense of gratification, some temporary positive sensation, whether we're seeking stimulation or seeking relief from suffering. If we're just doing something that gives us that temporary effect, it's not going to last, and we're going to get stuck in some type of addictive pattern, continuing to repeat that same behavior, that same way of reaching out for relief or stimulation. Because it doesn't last, we have to keep doing it over and over, and the further we go into that, the less satisfying or fulfilling it becomes. It's like we have this bottomless pit that can't be filled in, and it's almost like there's this spirit attached to you, this sense of emptiness, this void, this craving for peace or craving for excitement, whatever it might be. And that addictive pattern, whether it's using a drug, gambling, shopping, sex, whatever might be there, giving you that sensation, it's kind of consuming your life. There's a part of you that grabs onto it because it's a quick, easy way to get that short-term feeling, so it's easy to keep going back to. But then there's another part of you that knows it's not going to last, it's not going to bring fulfillment, and it's actually creating some harm or dysfunction in your life. It might be leading to damage in your relationships or loss of adequate functioning in your career or your job. So there are many ways that that pattern is actually creating more negative experiences in your life, more suffering. So it's a case of looking beyond the immediate gratification to be able to work toward the longer term fulfillment. One thing to consider is that when people are in addictions, those addictive behaviors can often lead to other unhealthy behaviors, let's say. So a person who's a gambling addict, they may put themselves into debt, and they may start lying or cheating or stealing to try to address that financial situation they've put themselves in. So certainly that particular addiction may have led to antisocial behaviors for that person, and now that person's feeling even more shame, more negative feelings about themselves. So if you focus on the morality aspect and you point toward that person and tell them what they're doing is bad, that they're hurting themselves and other people, that in itself often does not cause them to control their behavior, and it's not helping them toward feeling whole within themselves or shifting into an identity where they feel more peace and joy and meaning in their life. It's reinforcing the sense of shame, and that feeling or sense of shame in itself is often a key factor in driving a person to impulsively engage in whatever addiction they're accustomed to. So anyone who's close to people that are in addiction, whether you're a family member or a friend, or you're a clergy person or a therapist, you'd want to be cautious to not impose that moral judgment there. You'd want to find some way of connecting with that person in a manner that helps support them finding the sense of self-love and self-worth, in seeing their own potential, in finding meaning and purpose in life, and in addition to that, having self-forgiveness, self-acceptance, releasing whatever guilt or shame they may carry based on what has already occurred. We certainly can't go back and undo the past, but we can make peace with it, we can accept it, we can see that who we are is not defined or limited by our past experiences, by our role or identity that we've been building up until now. We can always change, we can always shift our identity, and we can always reunite with our spiritual essence, that part of us that is in a way pure, that's not limited by the human experience. You could think of it kind of like an innocent child that hasn't had experience yet, that's just seeking to create, to explore, to have new adventures. So our soul is like that in a sense. It's projecting the stream of its own consciousness to have these human experiences. Prior to having those experiences, it doesn't really have a knowledge or understanding of what shame or guilt or sadness or grief or anger or anxiety, all those things feel like. And then once we get into this corporeal form of experience, you could say, the material world, we go through all those different emotions, all those different challenges, and it's very natural to seek out relief from something that gives you some form of peace or numbness, or to seek excitement through something that stimulates you in some way. So we're not going to morally judge people for reaching out toward those addictive behaviors. We can all have times in our life where we fall into some type of pattern like that. We're all in the same boat in that sense. So we can actually have compassion, we can have understanding, and we can give support in whatever way is reasonable at a particular point along that person's path. There are times where a person is acting in a very destructive way due to a substance addiction or other addiction, and you may need to distance yourself from them for your own well-being, your own protection at that point, so you're not obligated to play a savior role, but you're also not going to help that person by morally judging them, by telling them they're bad or sinful or awful in some way. It's ideal in that situation to just be more neutral, to just kind of step away, to have compassion, and let that person continue on their own path until they're ready to take the steps that are going to bring them in a direction for their healing and recovery. I hope that this discussion, this commentary, has given you some insight or understanding. For those that are interested in more resources for holistic health and personal growth, you can visit my website, phinsights.com, phinsights.com. For now, I wish everyone a wonderful day. Namaste.